Hey y'all. So today I wanted to discuss two separate terms. They are forgiveness and mental transmutation, or just transmutation. I could even throw in the term alchemy there. But when I say forgiveness, I'm not really referring to the common understanding of the term, but specifically the term as it's used from A Course in Miracles and the intelligence that's pointed to using that term from that. And when I say transmutation, I'm specifically referring to the more hermetic understanding of the term, coming from books such as the Kybalion and the Arcane teaching. These terms have wide followings, and both of these practices are very, very powerful. Arguably two of the most powerful occult practices that are available on this planet at this time. It's a very bold statement. I understand that. The truth of that is what it is. It is what it is. So they're somewhat still, and this is another cool term that everybody can like and kind of ooh and all over, is arcane. These terms are still less and less, but I would say to a degree they're still somewhat arcane, which means simply understood only by a few. And I would have to say that seems to be the case, especially when we're looking at the correlation between the two and the relationship that they share, and potentially even them to be somewhat synonymous terms. So the forgiveness as talked about in A Course in Miracles, which A Course in Miracles and also understandings that are coming forth from the Hermetic traditions, are coming from very, very advanced metaphysical understandings to do with creation and the nature of reality, the seeming ways to rectify our experience and perception to what our relationship is to reality and what our relationship is to this level of perception, of it being illusory, of it being also a choice in our mind, of it being something that can be personally rectified, not through any type of personal accomplishment, but through a choosing correctly, a choosing to process and see what is true and what is false. And that's really, what these terms are doing. What they're pointing to is that process, the process of processing things appropriately, sorting them into their place, if you will. That's somewhat lacking. But forgiveness is basically the choosing to see through or see correctly, and forgiving the illusory presentation and holding the reality. When I say reality, I mean reality with a capital R, the reality of our relationship to divinity, divinity's reality as divinity, the absolute truth, if you will, as it being all that there is. So I'm choosing to forgive anything that seems to be other than that, anything that seems to present fragmentation, separation, fear, uh, anger, guilt, doubt, shame, anything that is presenting a threat to me or proposing individuality here, defense from another, attack from another. So anything that's proposing separation is coming up to be forgiven in that understanding. And to be held, when I say held, I mean held in the light of awareness. The way the Course in Miracles puts it through is all we need is a willingness to allow the Holy Spirit to come in and to look upon the presentation of error, and for us to allow that to be there, to not do anything to try to change it because it's already illusory. And then through that simple, they call it the small little willingness to look upon, it essentially is processed out. It is forgiven through that. It's a very simple process. Very, very simple. Now, the mind, it doesn't really want to get on board with this process, and it's not just gonna kind of go quietly, depending upon where one is spiritually. But that's okay. That's just there for forgiveness as well. Whatever comes up can be forgiven, because it would just also be proposing separation, fragmentation, smallness, lack. So that's there for forgiveness. Okay. And that's really pretty much sums up forgiveness as put forth through the Course. Now, there's a little bit more. Like I said, they have very advanced metaphysics. I didn't go into all that entirely. I don't plan on it right now. So that's more of the why forgiveness, why that's needed. All right, and so now we'll look upon the mental transmutation understanding. All right, so also this metaphysics is coming from the all of the Hermetic traditions. They seem to be very, very piecemeal. One of the differences between like Hermetic schools, if you will, and traditions or religions of the East was the Western schools, mystery schools, whatever you want to call them. These were people that were very much still, to a degree, still in the world. The Eastern traditions still seem to be very renunciate. All right, so the weeding out process of initiates, neophytes, whatever, that's a term that's used, beginners, seekers, the weeding out process through the Eastern school was already set and established in place through the renunciate style that was going to be committed to. If the student was going to commit to this renunciate lifestyle, then that itself showed some degree of purity. That itself showed some degree of willingness and readiness for them to be able to commit and endure and go through that lifestyle and continue with. And then the teachings would be delineated down and higher teachings, so forth, as the teacher saw or deemed that the student was ready. It was not that different in the Western schools, except there was no renunciate style. These would be people that were very much still in the world, oftentimes very intellectual, maybe held very prominent positions in society, very active in regular, household or day-to-day life. So they didn't have that type of weeding out process, but the information was still whoever was initiated was deemed went through and I'm not too familiar with this, so I'm not going to speak on exactly how they would go about doing it, but this is the understanding I have here, is there was still somewhat of a screening process of the purity of the individual, because there was a recognition of the power of these practices, of the purity of these practices and these understandings, that you didn't just go out and cast pearls before swine, per se. You waited and made sure that those that were listening had 2 good ears, that they were ready, they were pure. All right, and this is not, I'm not getting into like some level of superiority, inferiority, or whatever. It's just is what it is, kind of how it is, how it was. And so one of the main teachings, and that you wouldn't get the next teaching in the Western school until the first ones were very, very, very nailed down, and you had a very clear understanding of what that was, whether and they did come from a more intellectual understanding. So it may have just been a very much an intellectual understanding. Some may have been experiential, some maybe not. But one of the very first was to do with the understanding that the universe is mental. All is mind. There's one mind. And that was that everything else was built upon that. So that understanding was there, that the universe is mental, all is mind. So everything that comes up here is coming up on behalf and because of that one mind. All right. It doesn't mean me and my limited mind, the egoic mind, is the one mind. That's not it. And they were very clear on. They would be clear on that. There would be no confusion before moving on into these later understandings. So, and there's a lot more before you get to the point of mental transmutation, which is the processing, the ability to look upon and process any of these darker aspects, these fragmented aspects, back into light, back into love, into wholeness, into purity. And so anything that would come up in the experience, whether it would be, anger, fear, guilt, shame, this was the process was simply looking upon oneself. And when I say oneself, I mean the mind. In the mind, on a mental level, you would look, and anything that was coming up in the presentation, in the body, in the mind, as fear, as doubt, as fragmentation, as separation, lack, loss, would be held and processed back into purity. It would just be held with, be looked upon, be processed back into love, light. And that is the process of mental transmutation. So, as you can see, these 2 terms, very, very, very similar. I see lots of people online either talking about one or the other. And there's such a big correlation between the two, that the general intelligence, because the truth is the truth. The one mind is the one mind. The truth has been the same always and forever. So this understanding is not new. This is not new information that's being learned. Of Course in Miracles, I don't think it was delineated until the 60s, I believe, 1965, maybe something like that. All right, the Hermetic traditions, they weren't really. I don't think it was really made available to the public, in my knowledge, to a big degree, up until the early 1900s. That was when the text that I referenced earlier, the Kabbalion and the Arcane teachings, those were both put forward in the early 1900s, and they're the understanding there is that even that information was age old. It had came down through the ages, dating back to potentially definitely dating back from early Greek schools to potentially Egyptian schools as well, and possibly even prior to that to Atlantean understandings, depending upon who you talk to. But the mind likes to get involved with that and make a specialness out of that. The understanding is the understanding. The process is the process. Very simple. Very simple. You merely look upon in one's awareness and allow what proposes threat, what proposes lack, what proposes limitation, what proposes separation. Look upon it, whether it be anger, fear, guilt, whatever it is, you look upon it and you process it. I say process it. It's not a doing. You don't need to do anything. You process it. It processes through being looked upon. It's bringing, the shadow is brought to light. That's not a process. There's nothing to be done there. It's a shadow. That's all it is. And the seeming how long that can take is, that varies. The shadow can seem to dance for a little while, but that's fine. So, these two things, this is really what it's about. What any change and growth, evolution, healing of the collective, where that's going to come about from is through the application of these processes. This process, you could say. All right. And there's higher implications of that. We're talking about the resolution of the entire original error, if you will. The resolution of the idea that we've ever left God, that we've ever been separate, if there's ever been a fall. That's the full implication. So you can see, we are talking about something of extreme value, of extreme significance, of extreme power. But it's not a personal power. It is the power of love, the power of light, your true power, your true purpose. So I thank you, and hopefully we shed some light on that topic. As we move forward, I think these things will be less and less mystified, and certainly less arcane, more common knowledge. Thank thee. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good one. Peace and love.